Exclusively on Facebook Live, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Call in or text live 414-395-0484. Thought-provoking talk radio covering all topics from local to national and everything in between. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. That's The Forum, exclusively on Facebook Live, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Podcasts available on our website, theforum2.com. Check us out. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Monday, June 22nd, 2020. A lot of stuff happened over the weekend. Well, unless you're Donald Trump, where good things did not happen for him. An arena that was supposed to hold, or it was planned to hold 19,200 people. Fire Marshal in Tulsa came out with official numbers of roughly 6,200 people at Donald Trump's first return to the campaign trail since the pandemic. Let me take a moment and thank all of the peaceful protesters who reserved tickets to that rally and ultimately didn't show up. But we also need to look at, so anyone who wanted to go to the rally, because tickets were available for everybody. So if 19,200 people wanted to go to the rally, they could have gone to the rally. But what the number of reserved no-show tickets did is it got the Trump campaign believing that they would need a huge overflow area and an outdoor screen. They even set up another stage outside for the president to speak at, and there was literally nobody out there. And that deals a tremendous blow to the president. Now they're using, they're saying that K-pop fans, they call them stans, like super fans, reserved a bunch of tickets, and they used the app TikTok to promote all these teenagers going and reserving tickets for the Trump rally. They certainly did their part, but let me give a shout out to the people in the forum Facebook group because y'all reserved tickets like crazy. I reserved tickets as well, using the names of the members of the band Jodeci. And so I was shocked when the Trump campaign didn't announce that Jodeci was going to be in attendance. So there you go. Mike Pence will be in Pewaukee, which is a suburb. Well, I wouldn't call it a suburb of Milwaukee County. It's a town in Waukesha County tomorrow. And as I understand it, there are people that are doing the exact same thing for the Mike Pence Kellyanne Conway event tomorrow in Pewaukee. I swear I love you guys. A few things here. The Confederate statues and monuments, they have to come down. We shouldn't even be arguing about this. This shouldn't even be a discussion. You have to ask yourself, why are people clinging to a past of a dark, evil side of American history and celebrating those who wanted to fight for and did fight for the ability to own human beings and to subjugate human beings and to kill human beings and to treat people like property? They fought for that. Pure evil. And we celebrate those people by putting them on pedestals and giving them this top billing in history. There is no other country on the planet that does that. Celebrate those that lost the war, those that were on the wrong side of history. And so when you keep the monuments up, you give this false sense to people, not just those who believe that this is their heritage. And why would you want to be proud of such a heritage? But it also tells black people that we are going to put on pedestals people that fought to maintain your enslavement. And so it plays a trick on the psyche of not just African Americans, but white folks too. They believe that their cause is righteous because they're so-called Confederate heroes who are traitors, who committed acts of treason against the United States. They still believe that that is a part of their heritage that is worth celebrating. But then when you combine it with other images and other symbols, if you go in your cupboard and you have a Aunt Jemima pancake syrup bottle, it's a reminder of how we dehumanized African Americans and become so commonplace that when we have to fight and say Black Lives Matter, it just doesn't click for some people because they see us as less than humans. We are for entertainment. We are to be ostracized. We are to be defeated. And you would think that you wouldn't want those kinds of negative images to exist about African Americans because we had a black president for 2 terms. You wouldn't want the dehumanizing factors to still exist, but who knows? They're now taking down a statue of Theodore Roosevelt. There's a statue in New York where it depicts him standing above a Native American and African slave. Again, these images of subjugation that simply have to go because we can't adequately make our case when we have got public space dedicated to the dehumanization of marginalized people. We can't make the case because the symbols are standing in direct contrast to everything that people are fighting and protesting for. These symbols have to go. Once they go, we then have to figure out how we're going to teach history because history is completely repeating itself right now in the United States. And if we are to continue to follow that trajectory, that history is going to repeat itself, then this story does not end well for Trump supporters and those who believe the South is going to rise again and those who still support the Confederacy and the Confederate flag. If history is going to repeat itself, then their very dark day is coming. I don't know what it's going to take, quite honestly. And I think that as time goes on, more and more people are saying that they get it. More and more people are saying that they understand. More and more people are coming into the fold. But that's not enough. Once you have your reckoning and your understanding that some of the things that you thought and believed about African Americans were untrue, totally false, and you were also, utilizing, projecting those stereotypes, and once you have your reckoning, you have to do more because there are people that are in your circle, your professional circle, your personal circle, that believe those exact same things. And so it's not enough just to be woke all of a sudden. You have to do more. And also, let me put some onus on black people as well. how we indoctrinate people in this nation to be one-sided when it comes to race. And when we look at white privilege, it doesn't mean that because you're white, you're going to be rich and famous and everything is going to be perfect in your life. You still can screw your life up as a white person. It's just your skin color won't be a reason why you would be held back in life. That's it. Everything else could be potentially equal. It's just black people have to worry about screwing up, making mistakes, making bad decisions, all of that, plus our skin color and our perception when we walk into a room or we go to a store or when the police are behind us. It's a constant reminder that we can be subjugated because of the color of our skin, where white people have the privilege of not having that to worry about. Their lives might be screwed up, but it won't be because they're white necessarily. And just trying to get people to understand that is very, very difficult. But also when you have those competing images and monuments and statues that say, still in America in the year 2020, we are going to celebrate people that wanted enslavement to be the law of the land forever. They wanted the right to own, buy, and sell people as property, and we celebrate that. And so no wonder people are pointing to those monuments and pointing to the Confederate flag as their heritage. They are constantly reminded that slave owners were good people on both sides. They have to go. I saw some disturbing things this weekend, as I always do in these tumultuous political times. You know, there's some folks that have their really specific political viewpoints, and I really don't begrudge anybody for thinking the way they do politically. I can disagree, but it's some, form or fashion. I understand how people were raised and where they're from. That has a lot to do with what their political viewpoints are. Fair enough. I'm not going to change what someone saw growing up, right? I can't have much influence on that. But those who were supportive of Bernie Sanders, there's still presidential primaries going on. Obviously, Joe Biden is going to get enough delegates to be the Democratic nominee, but there are still people who want to see a Bernie Sanders style progressive agenda, and they are already vowing not to vote for Joe Biden. Already. They're standing firm and they're not going to support Joe Biden for whatever their reasons are. And it's very upsetting to me because I don't know if people are really grasping the reality of what happens if Trump gets reelected again. And I take some issue with Bernie Sanders, and those of you that know me and who have listened to me before, because of what Bernie Sanders did. Was he manipulated people in a similar way that Donald Trump manipulated people? Now, they're different subsets of the body politic, but it was manipulation nonetheless. Because if you tell someone that their student loans should be forgiven, they shouldn't have student loans at all, that their college should be free, their health care should be free, then why would you vote for anything less than that? The problem is a lot of young people who are experiencing those kind of economic hardships due to, coming out of college with tremendous amount of student loan debt, not being able to find a job that pays well, the cost of health insurance, even with the Affordable Care Act. When you have people that are vulnerable because of those economic hardships, and you tell them, or Bernie Sanders tells them, or one of his many surrogates tell those people, if you vote for us, if you get involved with this particular movement, all of your financial troubles are going to go away. It just doesn't work like that. The political process is difficult and it's painstaking, and it was created that way on purpose. If we have the best ideas that will fix the environment, that will end, racial segregation, that will end any bad thing that is happening in this country, it is never easy to get those things enacted into law. The reason why the political process is so slow and arduous, it's not so it's easy to get good laws and bills passed. Is to make it difficult for bad bills and bad laws to get passed. So all of the ideas of the hardcore progressive left, Joe Biden may not embody some of those, but here's where the saving grace is. And this is what I want to communicate to people that are finding enough fault with Joe Biden that they will not vote for him. And there's going to be millions of people that are not going to vote for the Democratic ticket that otherwise would be Democratic voters. And so when I say in previous broadcasts, we have to overperform, that's what I'm talking about. Because not only do we have to make up for the number of people who are going to vote for Republicans up and down the ticket and are going to vote for Trump, we have to vote in place of those who don't like Joe Biden for whatever reason, even if Joe Biden picks a black woman to be his running mate. Even if Joe Biden nominates Barack Obama to the U.S. Supreme Court, for those people, that's not enough for them. Even if a black woman, you got to keep in mind, if the Democrats win 3 of 4 contested U.S. Senate seats in November, just 3 of 4, Colorado, Arizona, North Carolina, and Maine. So just 3 of the 4, okay? And Joe Biden picks an African-American woman as his running mate, which it's looking like that's probably going to be the case. However, I'm always disappointed by who individuals pick as their running mates, but we'll give Joe the benefit of the doubt. You know what that means? If we pick up 3 Senate seats, Joe Biden picks a black woman to be the vice president, then the tie-breaking vote for the Democrats in the U.S. Senate will be a black woman. I don't think y'all understand the historical pedigree of that, meaning that you're now going to get your national Juneteenth holiday. Means that Washington, D.C. is going to get statehood. You know, the House has already passed a statehood bill for Washington, D.C., but the Senate is not going to hear it. If you get a black woman to cast the tie-breaking vote to give Washington, D.C. statehood, you got 700,000 people who are paying federal taxes but have no federal representation. That's number one. Number two, you get 2 more Democratic electoral votes. And if Washington, D.C. becomes a state, which it should be, it would be the most blue state, probably as blue as California or New York. And so to find some arbitrary and capricious reasons not to vote for Joe Biden is poisonous. But my saving grace for those folks is this. Look, I know they don't like Joe Biden. We're not going to agree with him on all the issues, nor should we think we're going to. Nobody is perfect. No candidate is perfect. But the really progressive political agenda can still be enacted at the local level. Because right now in this country, politics are more local than ever. The movement is in the streets. It is a movement of people who are finally getting up, getting off of their phones, getting off the couch, getting out of the house, even during a pandemic. That is how strong this democracy is right now. And we shouldn't lose that momentum because some of those young people don't want to vote for Joe Biden because he technically is their grandfather's age. But that progressive momentum that exists in the streets where our democracy is really taking root should be focused on the local level. There's a lot of change that can happen at the local level. What we need at this point in time is an executive at the federal level that will begin to bring the country back together, that will appoint judges to not just the Supreme Court, but to the federal bench, that will capture this moment in time with those lifetime appointments of those judges. Someone who can help us regain credibility in the world, someone who can repair our relationships, someone who's going to protect the Affordable Care Act, really big picture stuff. That's what we need. So the ultimate progressive agenda is not going to happen immediately at the federal level, but what can happen is some of those really progressive ideas that Bernie Sanders was floating during his campaign can happen at the local level. Bernie's been relatively silent, and that bothers me because he was late to the party in supporting Hillary Clinton in 2016, knowing that his supporters back then were not fans of Hillary Clinton, and they ultimately did not vote for Hillary Clinton, at least not where they should have, because Trump only won by 77,000 votes in 3 states. Let's not pretend that Donald Trump won by some outrageous landslide. It was 3 states. It was here in Wisconsin, it was Michigan, and it was in Pennsylvania. That's it. It was a fluke, quite honestly. It was people didn't like Hillary Clinton, they didn't like Donald Trump, and they decided to do something else with their time. They either didn't vote, or they voted for Gary Johnson, or they just voted in their local contest. So this thing is very obtainable to remove Trump from office. But one of the other reasons, because you have to give people a bunch of reasons to vote Trump out of office, I thought that Trump himself would be enough reason. And if you've noticed, so the Biden campaign is working, but they're just not out publicly because they're allowing Donald Trump to make a complete fool out of himself. They're allowing him to show that he is getting worse. He is getting more dangerous. His words are getting more racially charged, and just showing that is probably better than any campaign event that Joe Biden could do. And plus, Joe Biden already has 100% name ID. Everybody knows who he is. Either you're going to vote for him or you're not going to vote for him. And if you're not going to vote for him, then you might as well be voting for Donald Trump. But let me not upset those folks that they're not Joe Biden supporters. The political agenda that they want to see can be can start with the local elections and local elected officials that can help enact some of those progressive reforms that those people desperately want to see. And I think they're important for our democracy. But to expect the president, the next president of the United States, who we hope is Joe Biden, to be able to do all of that is going to be difficult. There's a lot of undoing that needs to be done, a lot of relationship building and repairing. I'm also thoroughly convinced that Joe Biden will appoint the right people in different cabinet level positions where Donald Trump has not. Donald Trump fires everybody that does not do exactly what he says, including break the law. So I think that should be the benchmark that we should achieve. And I hope it's not too much of an ask, but so far it seems to be, because if we throw this one, history will not forgive us. Not to mention landmark Supreme Court decisions, because the Supreme Court is what the court is doing, because they handed down Donald Trump two very decisive defeats over the past week. They are trying to keep this republic together by a shoestring. A conservative Supreme Court is doing what the Republican senators tried to do in 2016. You guys remember when the Republican senators did not want to give Barack Obama his third selection to the U.S. Supreme Court in Merrick Garland? It also should be noted that 54 Republicans had voted for Merrick Garland in the past to put him on the D.C. circuit. So Republicans had voted to support Merrick Garland before, but they didn't want to give Barack Obama his third pick. Now the U.S. Supreme Court is acting as if it's a liberal court, because that is the only thing that it can do to keep this nation together. If Donald Trump gets another one or possibly two selections to the U.S. Supreme Court, then I want you to take a real long look in the mirror when 13-year-old girls are giving themselves abortions with coat hangers, because that's going to happen. Just because you think it's a terrible, horrible thing and that would never happen, I am telling you that is what is going to happen. So if someone is standing on this pedestal of righteousness because Joe Biden is not liberal enough, not progressive enough, just know that little girls are going to die. And maybe to you, standing on those your progressive bona fides, it's enough to sacrifice the lives of little girls. But I think that enough people have died in this country because of this leadership. If the coronavirus pandemic isn't telling you all you need to know, then I don't really know what we can say. But then there are some of us who believe that things can actually get better. We can begin to repair the breach. And there's those individuals that I'm looking forward to working with. Vanessa, good morning. Good morning, Cassandra. Antonio Glenn, good morning to you, sir. Good morning, Renee. Jenny Hendrickson, how do we respond to the people who argue that these monuments, etc., are necessary so that America doesn't forget its dark past, rather than thinking they are celebrating this horrific acts of the past? I hear this being raised. What are your thoughts, please? So history needs to be put in a context, right? If we look at the slave trade as holocaustic, which it was, think about how the Holocaust during World War II was taught. It was taught as an atrocity. It was taught as something that should never happen again, and we should never forget. In fact, that's the slogan of the Holocaust, never forget. It seems that we are quick to forget slavery, and whenever black people bring up the issue, what do people always say to shut down the argument? Oh, that was a long time ago. And when you say it was a long time ago, you're not encouraging critical thinking about what that institution did then and how it still affects the psyche of not just African Americans, but white people right now. When you are still celebrating these monuments, you are celebrating treason. You are celebrating a group of people that tried to split the United States because they so desperately wanted to own people they were willing to go to war. But history hasn't taught that. I mean, how many of you learned about the atrocities of slavery other than maybe watching Roots in your history class during Black History Month? It wasn't taught. It's not taught with the same disgusting and visceral and real language of the Holocaust. We didn't see the images of the torture that slaves had to endure. All we see is the rosy parts, because that's the thing about how this American system is set up. It's designed to make sure white people don't feel bad for the terrible things that they do. And that's not, that's fake news, right? When you don't want to tell the stories of the atrocities of one particular group, the dominant group, you're not being honest about what they actually did. And the fallacy is that we as black people are going to blame every single white person alive right now. And let me be honest, most white people that are alive right now are too poor to afford a slave anyway, so y'all wouldn't own slaves. In fact, some of y'all would have been indentured servants yourself. There has to be some kind of a national curriculum, and this is the kind of stuff that can be enacted in federal legislation. Not that a national Juneteenth holiday is the end-all, be-all, but it gives us a moment in which we reflect on something that oftentimes gets overlooked. Think about the other national holidays we have. We got Flag Day. It needs to be put in a context. There are teachers that dedicate the chronological order of history to their curriculum. They tell the stories and they have textbooks and materials in their classroom that do tell the story, but it's not a standardized curriculum. Speaking of a standardized curriculum, do you have to know anything about slavery, the institution of slavery, and or Jim Crow to get into college? You don't have to, unless they put it on an ACT test or an SAT test recently. You don't even, to get to the finest universities anywhere in the world, which are here in the United States. Harvard University, first graduating class of 1642. Harvard University is older than the country it's in. And you don't have to know details about the Black Holocaust in this country to get into that university. That is a problem. That means that some of the best and brightest minds that the world could ever produce are still ignorant to the fact that black people suffered and the suffering continues today. We have to do better as a nation. Tammy Reed, good people on both sides, but bad people on the outside of the BOK Center in Tulsa. I agree with you, Tammy. Good morning, Mary Brown. Mary Brown said, I can't believe that, referring to something I probably said some time ago. If not Biden, who else is there? Nobody. Joe Biden is just a proxy for someone that will, I hope, sign Democratic legislation that has been stalled in the House. When that legislation is passed by a Democratic Senate, because all we need is to pick up 3 or 4 U.S. Senate seats. And I'm more optimistic about that than probably anything else. But then there's this other thing I'm going to get to in a minute, but don't let me forget this other thing. In fact, I probably should say the other thing right now because my mind is racing and I'll probably forget. You know that Donald Trump can still get indicted if he leaves office? You want to know why Donald Trump wants to get reelected so bad? Donald Trump doesn't even like being president. It's too much work. It requires too much reading. You got to say stuff and you got to listen to advisors. Trump doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be president. And you know he doesn't want to be president. You can tell he doesn't want to be president. You want to know why he's running for reelection? So the statute of limitations runs out on his federal offenses for obstruction of justice and for campaign finance reform. When Donald Trump loses, he can be indicted. I need you all to understand that. Criminal charges will be filed against Donald Trump because they are waiting for him in the Southern District of New York, chomping at the bit. That is why Donald Trump is trying to remove the U.S. attorney from the Southern District, the sovereign district they call it, the sovereign Southern District of New York. That is where Donald Trump is going to face federal charges. Now, you can't indict a sitting president. Trump knows that. That's why he needs to remain president. If he gets reelected, then the statute of limitations runs out. And so after his second term, he can no longer be indicted. If you want to see Donald Trump in handcuffs, Joe Biden is the only way to do that. Now, I know you don't like Joe Biden. He's old and he's probably a racist and all this other stuff. I guess if you compare the two, one racist is a little bit less racist than the other, especially if one of the racists is going to appoint African Americans and have a black woman as his running mate, which means the next president of the United States very well could be a black woman. That same running mate that Joe Biden has could be the tie-breaking vote for Democrats in the U.S. Senate. I know you're going to have to hold your nose. I know it. I know that he's not perfect. I also am a little disappointed that Bernie Sanders is now making this case because he can make this case a lot better than me, especially because we're in a moment where the American democracy is very pliable. We don't really know, other than history repeating itself, which looks really bad for Trump supporters and looks really bad for people that are still flying the Confederate flag. History said that they are going to lose, and so history is repeating itself because it's almost like we have a civil war going on right now. So they're going to lose. It's not looking good because if history is repeating itself, well, then it doesn't look good for those people. I just want people to think out of the box. Um, Bernie Sanders could be much more active because he has a responsibility to the people that bought into his political agenda, and they really bought into it. And he was the majority of the time he was campaigning for president. It's been essentially nonstop since 2016. He supported a Western European style of healthcare, and he would note, a number of countries in Northern Europe and Western Europe where they have free healthcare and free college. A particular type of what they call democratic socialism in these Western European nations. So I'm going to explain to you why I find some fault with Bernie Sanders, because I've taken so much heat, because I probably wasn't clear enough or articulate enough in why I've taken issue with Bernie Sanders. First and foremost, he took advantage of vulnerable people and told them they could get a whole bunch of stuff all easy and free like if they just voted for him, and that's not how the political process works. We took advantage of people that didn't understand it takes generations for these things to be enacted, not from one president to another. The only way Bernie Sanders could have enacted some of those sweeping progressive changes is if he was a dictator just like Donald Trump. He's in support of a democratic socialism that is widely used and understood in Western Europe, where you've got really, really high taxes, but there's a lot of public benefit to those high taxes. It's amazing how it's very easy for Bernie Sanders to support that European-style democratic socialism when it comes to healthcare, but not when it comes to policing. Because in Europe, they don't just the cops just don't murder people. You got some European countries, the cops don't even have guns. They have like a whistle and a flashlight. Hey! Or with their European accent. Hey, stop that. Don't do that anymore. You can support a Western and a Northern European style democratic socialism when it comes to healthcare, but not their style of policing. Defund the police looks a lot like some of those, like Scandinavia. It looks a lot like that. The police don't kill people. They dispatch other resources to fight crime. And it works, because if you look at the number of officers, was it Iceland that the police didn't kill anybody for like 10 years or something? Now, also, those European countries don't have the deep-seated issues with race. They're very homogeneous. So you have a country that's 95% white people. Then they tend to do things for each other, like provide free healthcare and provide free colleges and universities and all sorts of other public benefits. But because we still have these issues of race that are still unresolved, there are people in this country that don't want you to have health insurance or don't want free universal health care in this country. And I'm not kidding you when I say this. They don't want you to have universal health care coverage because they don't want black people and minorities and Mexicans to get it. So they are willing to go without so that other people that they disagree with don't get. The strength in Trump's base does not come from what he is doing for them. Because the Bible Belt and the southern states in which Donald Trump won't even have to campaign, like he didn't need to campaign in Oklahoma. He's got the electoral votes in Oklahoma come hell or high water. And there's a number of states like that. Mostly in the South and in the interior West. It's not that he's doing anything for those people. Poor people in Mississippi that are voting for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is going to win Mississippi by 25 points, I'm sure. They're not voting for him because he's doing a lot for them. He's not even promising to do a lot for them. It's that he hates the same people they hate. So it's not what he is doing for his base, is that he is echoing the ignorant and racist sentiments of his base. That's why they're voting for him. So his standard is so low that he doesn't have to accomplish anything. As long as he goes after blacks, as long as he goes after illegal immigrants and keeps children in cages, as long as he says that all of the news that is trying to be accurate and factual is fake, that's all they need. That's why they're so dangerous, because they're not holding Donald Trump to any standard. Now, if you look at the flip side of that, Barack Obama had to do right by us. It wasn't about Barack Obama saying negative things about racists, because most days we'd rather not think about those ignorant people because we know that there's real policy and real reform that needs to happen. Barack Obama was held to a different standard because we expected him to deliver for us. not just talk negative stuff about the people we don't like, because that gets us nowhere. We didn't have time to be consumed with such trivial tabloid nonsense. We wanted accomplishment. We wanted an Affordable Care Act. We wanted dedicated resources to historically black colleges and universities that Barack Obama enacted first. We wanted judges that see a much more progressive side of the interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. We needed accomplishment from Barack Obama. Barack Obama was not reelected in 2012 because he used a lot of negative words and descriptions of people that we don't like, because he was building on a record of accomplishment. That's the difference. And so if you have a president who doesn't have to do anything, who doesn't have to have any real, tangible, measurable accomplishments, and you still will have support for him, that's really, really hard to defeat. And that's why I'm nervous that there are people who are not going to support Joe Biden, because he is not perfect. Marlon Pitchford says, what up, people? Replying to Jenny, Justin for Minutes says, Jenny L. Hendrickson, there are no monuments for Hitler or any other Nazis in Germany, so statues aren't needed to remember history. That's about as succinct as you can say it. He fires them, then he calls them wackos and liars. Did you see where a reporter flat out asked him, why do you hire people you later consider to be wackos and liars? You know how there's those people, that's kind of a general statement, those people that every time they break up with somebody, like they have a new girlfriend or boyfriend every time you see them, like they bring somebody new to Thanksgiving every year. And you never see them with the same person twice. You know those people. And then you see them with somebody, and they introduce you, like, oh, this is my new boyfriend, girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. And then you see them, I don't know, a month later or 2 months later, and they're with somebody new. And you ask them, oh, well, what happened to your previous boyfriend or girlfriend? Oh, they were crazy. And then there was somebody else. Oh, what happened to the last? Oh, no, they were crazy. Donald Trump is that boyfriend. They can't keep a steady relationship with his staff. Really, he's the only one. Like, here's what all of these people have in common. Him. He hired folks. They did their best to try and, I don't know, uphold the law. Some did better than others. And then Trump fires them and he says it's their fault. Just like the person who's always single and says, oh, all my exes are crazy. Well, if all your exes have the same thing in common, which is you, then who's the crazy one? Good morning, Douglas. Jenny replying, Tammy Reed, America doesn't use those statues to reconcile with its dark past. They're not needed. That's a very simplistic response, but appreciate the comments. Those responses are not enough to persuade some people. I'm trying to arm myself so I can persuade white people who are stuck on this idea of the monuments being... Listen, white people, don't ask black people what you need to do to talk to other white people. Y'all got to stop this. You're making everything, all the onus is on us. Remember, we're still a numerical minority. But doesn't that just show the incredible blind spots that white people have when it seems like they have everything else in American society figured out, but white people don't know how to talk to other white people. We can't help you with that because we don't know how to talk to white people either. See monuments and statues as treasonous. We are celebrating people that wanted to maintain other human beings as property, including raping women. It's amazing how we have to explain this to people still to this day, which means that if you don't get it still, then you probably weren't able to explain it to your children. And so here's the thing. Some of you are white people who, some of you are great. A lot of you are great. It's just there's a system that blinded you to. You may not be raising racist children. You might be doing a good job to get your children to, I don't know, be colorblind, like that's something positive. You might be doing a very good job of that. You raise your children not to use the N-word. But you might be accidentally raising the next Karen or raising the next barbecue Becky to where your children, when they become functioning adults, still feel uncomfortable around black people existing in public. Just because your kids don't use the N-word and they try and treat everybody fair and with a level of dignity, humanity, and respect, your kids still might be the ones calling the cops on black people at a park. still might be the ones calling the cops on a black man who is bird watching and telling a white woman to put her dog on a leash in front of the sign that says your dog needs to be on a leash. Don't raise one of those. Because I can't help but to think, whenever a white person has to ask a black person how they should talk to other white people, it's like I can't. Y'all need to, because you have so much in common culturally and in history in this nation, that now we have to tell you how you need to talk to your own culture and community. We got enough to worry about. Tammy Reed, but at what point has someone taken a field trip to those monuments to discuss history? Perhaps it's done and I'm not aware. Also, statues aren't erected to teach history. They are erected to glorify people and confirm their heroism to society. If they are needed to truly teach history, put them in a building, and if someone is so inclined to go visit them, they can. I have no interest in seeing them, especially in a public space. So if the Daughters of the Confederacy, which was a group in the 1930s that erected 1,500 Confederate monuments all over the country, including in Wisconsin, which was a Union state, if they were that concerned about preserving their history, then there'd be some group or some organization that would take all the Confederate monuments down and put them in a museum somewhere in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or in Huntsville, Alabama, where you have the Von Braun Center, which is the convention center in Huntsville, Alabama, that's named after a Nazi. Did you guys know that NASA was started by a group of Nazis, a bunch of German scientists that the U.S. brought over here to develop our space program? If they really believe it's a part of their heritage and their history, then let them raise the money. They should want to collect all of their statues and have all of their statues under their care so they can make sure those statues are maintained forever. And put them in a museum somewhere, but don't put them on public display like these are great heroes, because some people don't know any better, because I don't know how good of a job we're doing of teaching history in this country, because we are clearly repeating it. But there's some benefit to that, because if you look at who lost in the long view of history, it was the people that were on the wrong side. It was the people that weren't fighting for justice. It was the people that were anti-progressives. They are going to lose. And I just wish folks understood that you clearly are on the wrong side of history. And so there's been a number of Trump supporters that are still in the Forum Facebook group. There's no place for them. And they troll every now and again. I want the group to be a place in which the enlightened can share ideas without Trump supporters putting in their 2 cents, because we're at a point right now in America where you're not going to change anybody's mind. If there is someone who would typically vote for a Democrat that is thinking about voting for Trump for a second term, then they never were a Democrat in the first place. There is no convincing that anyone can do, especially on the internet. Neither do I. Please don't think this is my position. Look, Jenny, I don't know, but I just know that we get tired, especially now white people that are finally waking up, and we're glad that you're waking up, because being in this country and being white means that you were indoctrinated too, and it was a very evil way in which they did it, that you just subconsciously believed your importance was ranked a little bit higher than everybody else. And then when people finally realize that they have been lied to, and they want to reform and they want to learn, I would say there's a whole bunch of black authors that you can read. Hell, you can just go to Amazon and they have the black movies listed for you. So paying attention to culture is necessary, but it's also very much of a personal endeavor. If you want to be better, all the information of human history is available in your pocket on your phone. But let me also say this, and this is the part I was going to allude to earlier. When there's a person that says, you know what, wow, I was wrong about a bunch of stuff, and now they're active and they're participating and they're protesting and they're sharing information with their other white friends and their other white family, I think it is still necessary for marginalized people and black people to welcome those people into the fold, because it's like you're being reborn. Once you realize that you have been lied to and you have been forced to believe that people of color are less than, once you realize that those were all falsehoods, you become this new person. You become this open book. Now you're ready and willing to learn. I think it is necessary for us to not abandon those folks, because what I'm seeing a lot of is this. So there's some white folks who are waking up. They're like, oh my God, I'm sorry, and I'm ready now. And they might be 50, 60 years old. And a lot of black folks don't care. Like, oh, you waited this long, we don't need you. No, the only way we get buy-in to change these institutional systems in this country is if we get buy-in from a larger group of people. White folks are still 61, 62% of the population in this country, and we need buy-in from them. And I know you don't want to convince them. I know it's not your job to do so. But once they decide that they want to be an active participant and they want to use their privilege to spread more awareness, then we have to work with them. Because what happens is, if you get a white person who says, oh, I don't want to be a racist anymore, teach me, learn me, and we tell them to screw off, then it's easier for them to go back into their racist ways, because they can say, you know, I tried to be an ally with the African Americans or the Hispanics or the Asians or the Native Americans, but they thoroughly rejected me because I'm late to the party. Better late than never. You still have the rest of your life to do a lot of good, to have positive influences on people. And so we got to stop rejecting those folks just because they come to the party late. We would rather have a big attendance at the party than have everybody be on time or early. And now Arizona, says Jamie Haddon. Good morning, all, says Rodney Bates. White people pick up a book. That's a little bit easier said than done. When someone realizes that they have been betrayed, because what America did is it betrayed people. It betrayed white people. Probably as much as it betrayed anybody else, because they were taught to believe in a pseudo superiority, which is not true. It's almost like finding out that your husband or your wife cheated on you. You're like, oh, I didn't know that I was betrayed. And you're shocked. There's one or two things that can happen in that scenario. You just resign to the betrayal and just say, oh, well, I guess I'm just worth being cheated on, and that's just what my life is going to be. There are some people that resign to the fact that they are white supremacists and they're racist, and that's just how they're going to die, because they don't think that they don't think any better of themselves. They don't think that they deserve to be enlightened, and that's a self-esteem thing, and that's a whole bunch of other things, because some people, all they have to cling to is the feelings they get from their whiteness and from their culture. And then those that say, oh, why don't we have White History Month? Really? But then there's an opportunity once people find out that they were betrayed by this system. There's an opportunity for them to relearn everything and to rediscover everything. And then once they cross over to that, the path of enlightenment, where they see people as human beings and they value their contributions and they value their thoughts, their emotions. They value their experiences. It's a much better way to live, because some of the anger that people are hanging on to, and it's really, angry people exist all over the place. And if racial hatred makes it easier to redirect your anger, because if you're just an angry person, it's easier to be angry at somebody else than to be mad at yourself, right? It's easier to hate them than to realize that you are incredibly flawed and sad. It makes it easy. Racism is a scapegoat for unhappy people. Because if you don't like yourself or your situation, it is so easy to blame a Mexican who took your job. Forget the fact that you weren't coming to work on time, you were a terrible employee, you were insubordinate. No, forget all that. You didn't lose your job because of those things. You lost your job because there's Mexicans moving to my town. You see how we can be the scapegoat? And I don't know how we wake people up from that, because we always want somebody to blame. When we screw up, the first thing some people do is, well, it's your fault. Ivy Edwards Adkins says, there's nothing to teach. Treat people like you want to be treated, or learn real history. That's a pretty good set of guiding principles, but you have to do more than treat people the way you want to be treated. So an example would be, if I'm out in the store or something, I mean, I'm nice to the person who's ringing me up or who's bringing my food. I'm very nice to the server, but I need them to do more than just their job. I need them to do more than treat me how they want to be treated. Everybody says hello and people are very, very pleasant. We need more than just political correctness, don't we? We need more than that. We need people to actually dig in and get involved and do a lot.